Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. So I want to thank everybody for joining me today. My name is Jennifer Morris. I'm a product evangelist here at MadCap Software. I am so excited to introduce, or perhaps reintroduce for some of you, Paul Stoecklein, the documentation manager here at MadCap Software. He's going to be walking us through the fun new features and all of the enhancements available in this last update that we just had to MadCap Central. So welcome, Paul. We're so happy to have you with us today. I want to just talk about, yes, a couple quick housekeeping items before we begin. This webinar will be recorded, as always. So if you have to pop out early, not to worry. We're going to send everybody that signed up today a link to the recording. There's also a questions panel in the GoToWebinar console. So if you have any questions that come up as Paul's presenting, feel free to jot them down. We'll do our best to answer them as we go. There's a lot to cover today, so we may not have time at the end to answer all of the questions, but we'll do what we can. But as always, we'll send out a document with all of the questions and answers compiled, and we'll send them out to everybody that registered. So again, thanks again, Paul, for joining us. I know you have a lot to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Jen. And hi, everybody. I'm glad you could all make it today. I'm really excited about this release of Central. If you kind of know any of the background of this, we first released Central earlier this year, and we've had a couple of minor feature releases. This is the first, what I would think is kind of a big one, and so it has a pretty big impact, definitely on me, and I think on several other people. Before we get into the details of what's new in this version of Central, and we're going to get into Central and go through these things. Some of you may not know much about MadCap Central yet at all. So just real quick, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because it has been out there for nearly a year now. This, if I were in the elevator with someone and I had to give them, they asked me, well, what's MadCap Central? This is my elevator speech. I would say MadCap Central is an application used on a browser to coordinate your work. You can add users and create teams. You can create tasks like sticky notes, to do, in progress, complete, kind of like a Kanban board. And you can upload your Flare projects. So it's super easy to build and publish output from there, which is a big deal for a lot of people. So it's especially good, Central is, for people who don't have the resources to set up their own source control, because Flare or Central comes with its own source control system, and they may not have the resources to set up publication of output. So it's very useful, especially to those people. Now, I might have to tweak this elevator speech just a tad because of the new features that we've added in this version. Actually, we don't have versions. It's just whenever we have new features, we just push them out there. So there's no version numbers. Everybody gets the same thing when we push these up there. So it's really three things that are new to Central. One is project checklists. This is the thing that I'm most excited about, probably because I'm selfish and this is the one I'm using most. Another thing is custom Vanity URL enhancements. So a lot more flexibility on how to control the URL of your final output. And then finally, support for project linking. And I'm gonna just give you a brief summary of each one of these before we get into Central and look at them. So the project checklist, what this does is it allows you to create checklists for work related to your Flare projects. And I love checklists. I've always loved checklists. I think it kind of goes hand in hand with being a check writer, with being a tech writer. I use them all over the place, but I never had a real good way. I never had a real good system until now. So what kind of checklist? Well, for example, things like topic to-do list. When you're documenting something for your company, you have all these topics, and there's all kinds of things you need to do for each topic. Or maybe a product release checklist. I use that. I use both of these. So overall, all of the different steps, all the different things that you got to keep track of, make sure you did during the release cycle. One of the cool things about this new project checklist feature is that they're integrated with your Flare files. That's a big deal, because you might be asking, well, why wouldn't I use something else? Why wouldn't I use some other tool to do this. Well, this allows you to tie directly into your Flare files. That's what really makes it unique. Not only that, but you can see charts showing the progress as you work, so you can immediately tell somebody, maybe your documentation manager or somebody, you go into a meeting, you can say exactly how far you are along. Vanity URLs, the second thing. So up until now, when we first launched Central, you had one vanity URL. When you first sign up, it's usually your company name. The one I've got is MadCap Software. So MC output, madcapsoftware.mcoutput.com, or whatever your company name is. And then the path goes beyond that with your target more specifically. But now, not only do you have that licensed vanity URL with your company name, you have more control at the target level. So you would have this auto-generated ID before that were representing your target. Well, now you can replace that auto-generated ID with whatever you want. Not only can you do it at the target level, you can go deeper down to the build level, and you can do vanity URLs on those. So probably the primary reason why you would want to do that is it allows you to have multiple builds in your target that are set to live that people can see, because up until now you could only have one. Only one build in your target could be set to live, and now you can do multiple ones, and we'll get into that and I'll explain why you might want to do that. The private URL is another new thing, and that has been implemented for all builds. Whenever you build something in Central, you're going to see this private URL, and this is really cool because it lets you easily share your output internally with people on your license, not people out in the public, but it's just a way to get it out there, maybe for people to review. Not only can you do these things, but you can also go to a build and you can say, hey, I don't want search engines finding output. I don't want this to show up in Google search. That was one that was pretty important to me. And then the third major area of change is this project linking support. So if you are using something like global project linking or runtime merging or multilingual output, those are things that before now they weren't really supported in Central. You couldn't connect to those other projects. Now you can. So that's just the PowerPoint presentation part of this. What I really like is to get into the actual software. So let's go into Central and take a look at each of these things. So this is Central, and as you can see up here, I've got a fictional license that I call FictionSoft that's open. This is the main dashboard. And I'd like to begin by talking about these project checklists. And so think about the software tools that are most important to you every day. I mean, I use a lot of software tools, and I'm sure you all do too. But some of them I maybe use once a week or once a month, or once every few months, and they're not as important to me as the things that I use every day, all day. Central, to be honest, I used it right away, but it wasn't one of these things that I opened up all the time. I didn't need to. But there are other tools that I do use all the time. Start with Outlook, got to have email open, and then Slack. In our company, internally, I actually use Slack way more than I use email. Flare is always open, and then also Capture. Those are the two MadCap products that I have open all the time. I depend on those heavily. I use the other products like Analyzer, but I don't use those every day, all day. And then my browser is usually open, different things like that. So those are some of the main things that I use all day, every day. There's one other thing that I have open all the time. I don't necessarily want to use it, but I kind of have to use it, and that's Excel. I could use another tool, but I've been using Excel, and the reason for that is I need a way to keep track of all the stuff that I'm doing, especially when I'm working in a Flare project. I've got all these topics. So every time we have a release, I find out, okay, what are the new features we need to document? Okay, we find out what those features are, then you got to research and you got to find out, all right, all these topics that I already exist in my Flare project, I've got to those are going to be affected. Those are going to be modified. And then I've got to create all these new topics. And for all of these topics, there are all these things that I want to make sure that I do, and I can't just remember them. So create a Excel spreadsheet, and this is what it looks like. This is the one I've been using for the last few years. It gets the job done, but it's not my favorite thing to use. And you're looking at this, and it's really a hot mess. What you have over here on the left are, this replicates a lot of the Content Explorer in my project, the folders and subfolders and the files, and I have to put these in manually. I have to just type these in whenever I have a new release, the files that are going to be affected by that, and then across the top, all the things I want to make sure that I'm doing. Has it been edited? Have I added it to the TOC? Blah blah blah. Has it been reviewed? And I just put X's in here. And then we tried to put some calculations so we could tell real quickly, oh, how far are we on this stuff? But this gets jacked up really quickly and easily. I'm not a big Excel person, so I don't want to spend time trying to figure this out, but you can tell it's screwed up, 127.3%. Something's wrong. So just ignore all this stuff. It gets broken. But I rely on this. And then I have a notes column where I might put, oh, this is the feature that's affected by this. So this is really important to me, this spreadsheet, even though I'm not in love with it. I have to use it. I need it. Another kind of checklist that we create, we have internally what we call a documentation Bible. So this is something I created years ago when I first started there at MadCap, to keep control of all of our information internally in the documentation team, all of our rules and standards, style guide, all of this. And one of the things I created is a few checklists. And one of them that's really important is a version release checklist. And it's very simple. It's just a table in here, but it's just a reminder to me of this long table. I have to do all these things every release cycle. So these are just a couple of ways that I use checklists, that I rely on them. So I need this sort of thing all the time. And what we did was we integrated this checklist feature into Central so that now I can get rid of that Excel spreadsheet. Now I don't have to have that other clunky one in my documentation Bible. I can't really do much with it. I just print it out. But now I can go into Central, and these checklists are all related to different projects. You can within a given project, you can create as many checklists as you want. So I've selected the project page right there, and you can see I have lots of Flare projects already uploaded. I'm just going to select this one, module 2. This is the dashboard, the main dashboard page for that project. If you've used Central before, you know that over on the right there were 3 different views: project dashboard, build management, and repository. Well, we've added checklists. So what you do is you go into the checklists, and you're going to see this little image right here will just show up the first time that you open up a page that doesn't have any checklists in it, and it just guides you. It says this is what you should do to create a checklist, and it's very simple. So let's say I wanted to create something to replace that Excel spreadsheet. I'm doing a new release. So I could just click that plus button, and it brings up this create checklist, and then I just give it a name. I'll just say my checklist for now. And then this type field, you have a choice. We're going to do project files, which means I want to tap into my topics or other project files in this Flare project that I uploaded. Immediately down below, you can see in this rows tab, what it's done is it's populated this with all of my files. You can see the main Flare project file right there, and then you see the content and the project folders for the stuff that's in my Content Explorer and the stuff that's in my Project Explorer. So I can just go through there and select the things that I want to include in my checklist. I don't have to go retype everything or go find it, or I do have to find it, but I don't have to structure the folders and subfolders, all that. It's all done for me. So immediately what it's going to do is it's going to select everything for you, assuming that you want everything in there. But normally when I create a checklist, it's a small section of what I want. Now, so what I do is I'll deselect things first, deselect everything. And normally when I create my checklist, they're topics. That's what I want included in mine. But as you can see, you could go into your project folder and you could create checklists based on your targets or TOCs or condition tag sets. It doesn't matter. In your content folder, you could go into resources and select images, master pages, so all that stuff. But I mostly want topics most of the time. So what I do is after I deselect it, I go in here and maybe I've got 3 topics in there, and I say, oh, I want all those. So I just select the folder. Maybe in this one, I just want that one. Down here, I just want a couple of these. I know that those are going to be affected in the next release. So I'm done there. And then I go into this columns tab, and I tell it what I want across the top. So in my example, it might be a variety of things, like I want a column that says edit. I'm editing this thing, or I've added it to my TOC or TOCs. I've put index keywords in there. I've considered all of the terms that are in a topic, and I've asked myself, do I need to add those to the glossary? Things like that. And it could go on, and you could add as many columns as you want. And finally, maybe something like reviewed. This thing has been reviewed. So it adds them down here in the order. This is how they're going to come across. This is the far left, and then the next one, this is the far right, reviewed. But you could change the order with these up and down buttons right here. You just click to reorganize things. If you want to change the label for something, just click on the little pencil thing, and you can go in and change the label, or you could get rid of one, whatever. But we're going to say this is okay, so I'm going to say save and finish. And there it is. So the name of the checklist is there on the left side. As I add more checklists, this thing is going to grow. It's telling me 0% is done. You've just added this thing. You can see this graph at the top. Nothing's done yet. And depending on the files that I decided to include, this section is going to allow me to expand and navigate to them. So all I did was I included things that are the topics, and so it's only going to show my content folder, and I can just click on it and zero down. There are some subfolders. Click on that one. Now I'm down to the individual topics, and you can see they're listed here, and all of my columns are set up. Not only do I have the columns that I put in place, but I have this note column at the very end that I can just click and type in. These other cells are just what you would expect. Right now, they're just these empty circles, which means that they have a to-do status. I haven't done anything with them. But as I work, I can click on each one. If I start editing basic steps, I can click on that, and I can choose what status do I want. Is it in progress? Is it completed? Is it NA? It's not applicable. Well, maybe I'm in progress with this one. And you can see immediately the graph changes at the top. The information changes. And maybe I go down here and that one's completed. Not only can I click in individual rows and select things, I can also click this gear button right here in the column. Maybe I've already gone through and I've put all these in the TOC already, and I can just quickly mark all those as complete. And everything changes up above. So I can immediately tell how far I'm done with something. So you just kind of work your way through this and check things off. It's actually kind of fun. And it's because colors are used, it's really easy to identify what's been done and what hasn't. The green really sticks out, and you just kind of work your way through it. The notes can be for anything you want. Maybe you want to just click in here and type set cross-references, or update images, or needs video, whatever you want. So it could be something like that. So it's real simple. And then if you need to navigate backwards, you have this breadcrumb section up here. So you can see we're not in very far. We're just in this subfolder, but I can click back to content so I can see the other subfolders and navigate to those, or I could go all the way up to the very top. So it's very easy to use, click around. This is a very small checklist. Normally mine are much larger than this. There's a lot more topics that I've got in here that I need to deal with. So in the past, what I've mostly done when I would have a topic checklist is I kind of would create one Excel spreadsheet for for all the features that I'm dealing with. But I think going forward, what I'm probably going to do, in case you're interested, is I'm probably going to create multiple checklists, one for each feature that we have. So as I said, whenever we do a new Flare release, I find out, we decide, what are the features that are going to go into this thing, and then I go into my tasks page, and I can create these high-level task cards. So these are different from checklists because these are just real high-level, but they don't take long to complete. So I might name each one of these after a certain feature. Right now I've just got feature 1, feature 2, all the way through 6 in here. So I might create one of these for each, and then I might create now going forward a checklist just for feature 1, and a separate one for feature 2, and a separate one for feature 3, and so on. I think that's got some benefits to it. One of them is maybe different authors are assigned to different features, and that keeps you from stepping on each other's toes. I know that one of the questions is probably going to come up. By the way, I can't see, if you're asking questions right now, I can't see any of that. I'm just kind of got tunnel vision. I'm just going through this. But one of the questions that I had was, well, what if two authors are working in the same, checklist? Well, there isn't any kind of source control mechanism. It's just the last person that makes a change in it, that's the one that's going to win. So I think it probably is beneficial to have multiple checklists, and so each writer who's working on a feature could work in their own checklist. Not only that, in a given release cycle, the same topic might be affected because of multiple features. And so if I just have one grand checklist, I don't know if I've completed that just for feature 1, feature 2, or feature 3, or what. So that's probably how I'm going to do it. So if I go back into my checklist, I've already created the thing, but if I decide to make changes to it, I can easily do that. I've got my checklist selected here. I just go up and select this button, and it opens up this dialog again. So I can change the name if I want. I'll call this feature 1, so only the feature 1 topics are going to be affected. And then if I remember, oh, there was another topic that I forgot to include in this, well, just open this thing back up and click on that, or maybe another topic, it'll just add those. Or maybe there's a topic that you said you initially wanted and you decided, no, I don't need to change that, so take it out. And save and finish, and this will just be updated with the new things, however you changed it. So it's really pretty easy to use. That is an example of the project file checklist where you're tapping into your Flare files. So it's really powerful in that way. But there are possibly generic checklists, other kinds of checklists like the product release checklists I told you about, where it's not necessarily tied to my files, but it's things I need to keep track of. So I could create one of those. Just click on this again, and maybe this is, I call this product release. And over in the type, instead of project files, I'll select generic list. And I notice that my rows tab changes. I don't have access to my Flare files anymore. I'm just going to type in whatever I want in here, and maybe it's something like, I'm just thinking of the process of going through a release cycle. I got to do research. I got to maybe the system requirements. I got to see if the link has changed for that. I've got to run analyzer reports. Got to test the output. all kinds of things. Now this is a very short list. Mine's much longer than this, but this gives you an idea. Just going down kind of in order of through the release cycle. I got to do all these things. And then in the columns, what do I put? Well, in my example, you don't have to put multiple columns. In mine, I just say progress. Has it been done or hasn't it been done? Add that one, finish it. So now this new checklist has been added over here. 0%, you can see the first one, I'm 8% done with it, almost 9%. And this one's very simple down here. It's just got these rows that I've added and the one column in it. And as I work my way through this release cycle, I can go through and I'm working on it. I'm getting things done. Or you might decide to have multiple columns in it. You go back and edit it, and maybe you've got, instead of progress, you've got 3 different writers, and they're in charge of different parts of this. So I'll change this label from progress to Bob. And then I'll add, I don't know, Susie and Tina. Okay, so now I've got different columns here. And so that changes, and maybe Bob's not in charge of analyzer reports, so it's not applicable. You know, maybe they're all doing certain things and some of them aren't doing other things, and you can just say, you know, however you want to do it. And then the notes column can be for whatever purpose you want. For example, test output. Well, what does that mean? It could be a good reminder to you that I want to test the XREF, the cross-reference links, or I want to, search for certain things. Whatever is part of your routine. In fact, this could be another checklist. You could create another checklist and then just refer to it in here. These are all the things I got to test. So it could be sort of nested in that way. All right, so it's pretty easy to see how that works. And if somebody asks you, how far along are you? Bob can go, well, I'm 33% done with my stuff. You could, easily let someone know about that. Now, another thing that goes along with these checklists is widgets, which is similar to the charts that you see up here. So there are lots of widgets that you can add in Central. If I go back to my home page here, you're going to see that I already added a few. And one of the things that we added in this latest release is a project checklist widget. So you can just add that to it, and it's just going to be completely empty because I'm out on my main dashboard, and it doesn't. I could have checklists all over the place, and it doesn't know which one to show initially. So I click in this, and I go to filters, and first I got to select my project. Well, I was in module 2 just now, so I'll select that. It's still empty because within the module 2 project, I might have many checklists. So I go back to the checklist and I go, which one do you want to show? Well, let's show this feature 1 checklist, go in here. So now anytime I open up this dashboard, I have a high-level look at how this checklist is going, and it'll just dynamically change as the checklist becomes more and more complete. So it's a real handy thing to have. Another thing that I do, there isn't any specific integration yet, but I kind of alluded to it before that there is a relationship between these task cards and checklists, or there can be. A task card can be anything. It doesn't have to be a feature item. It can be anything that you want to keep track of your progress at a high level. So in my example, I created a checklist just for feature 1. So I can open up this feature 1, and you can see that I've added a description of it. This is my description of feature 1, whatever that feature is. What I like to do also is I like to put information in these, like this is the lead developer, this is the lead QA person. So I can always go back when I'm working on it and say, oh, who's the expert on this? Who do I need to know? Or maybe it's me, something like that. But what you can also do is tie it to a checklist. Well, how would you do that? I'm going to go back to this checklist, module 2, and as I click on this checklist, notice up here it's got a unique URL up here at the top. And if I click on this other checklist, it changes. The number just kind of changed right here to 112. So what I can do is I can go just copy that URL, go back to my task card, go into the feature, I'm going to edit this description, and I could put in, well, I can't spell today, and what is my cursor stuck? There we go. Check. I'm having all kinds of problems. And I'm just going to paste this thing. And so if I open this up in the future, I can see that, and I could just click on that and it'll open up directly to that checklist. So it's just kind of a tip. So that is checklists in a nutshell. So the point I really want to get across here is when we first released Central, I went in here once in a while, you know, to build some output, to create some high-level task cards, but I didn't work in it every day. It wasn't one of those tools. Well, now with checklists, I'm using this every day. I rely on it because I have to keep track of all these little things I got to get done. So it's pretty much open along with Flare. Now, that takes care of checklists. The second major area that we made changes to in this version of Central is the Vanity URL. So I'm going to go back out here to my projects page, and I'm going to open up this project right here, big project, and go to the build management view of this. And you can see I've got several targets, and I'm going to click on this HTML5 target, and I already have several builds in here. This bottom one has a check mark, which means it's set to keep. It's not available to the public. It's most likely in this case, it's an old build that was set to live, but I didn't want to accidentally delete it. I wanted to keep it just in case I had to roll back to it, in case something was wrong with the new build that's set to live. This one is set to live right here as that icon. So as I click on that, you can see down below the URL. And the URL, as I mentioned before, is based on your license. So I'm going to actually blow this up, make it easier for everybody to see. So you can see HTTPS fictionsoft.mcoutput.com 23856/default.htm. So the fictionsoft, that comes from this under the server settings. You can see my Vanity URL. When we first signed up, our company's called Fictionsoft, and so that is the Vanity URL. That's what we've had up until now. This specific target that I've selected and generated, we just attached the ID to it, 23856. That's how it knows what target it is. And then default.htm, that's just because I have an HTML5. That's the format, and that's the main entry point. If it was something else like a PDF file, that main entry point would be different. But up until now, that was it. You were just kind of stuck with that. Well, maybe I don't want that 23856. I want something that's a little bit more unique. So this is, I call this big project. So I could go into my target and I could call it that. Or big project HTML5, whatever. I'll just call it big project. So there's a couple ways I can do this. I can right click on this, where I can use this button, this edit build settings. This is brand new. I'm just going to right click on this. I'm going to say settings, and it opens up this simple dialog. And I could go in here and I could just say big project and save and finish. And immediately down here, you see instead of that generated ID, it's changed to big project. So it's something a little bit more real life, or recognizable to people than just a generated ID. And you can also see when you click on the target over on the left, it shows down below, oh, that's that's the name of the vanity for that target. If I clicked on this one doesn't have a vanity set, so you're not seeing anything down there. So at the target level, that can be really nice. And so whichever build is set to live is going to use that. So if I were to roll back to this one down here, I decided, oh, there's a problem with that one, and I click on my build is live, and now that one is set to live, and it's still got the big project thing in here. This one I click on, it's set to keep. It's no longer down there because it's not set to live. So that's the vanity URL. But we decided that we wanted to go deeper than that, to the build URL. Oh, and by the way, there is this Vanity URL column. I don't think it's on by default, but you can always go into your column options and decide what columns you want to show. And I moved it from my available columns over to my selected columns and put it here right next to the keep. That's where I like it. So you can see in light gray, it says big project. So it's the build is inheriting that vanity URL from the target. But maybe I want to have the vanity URL set on a specific build. Well, why would you want to do that? It's easy, you know, to set it at the target level. Well, I think maybe the main reason to do this is for people who are doing versioned software. So with Flare, if you're familiar with Flare, you know, we started out with version 1, we went up to version 12, and then we switched to 2016 R2, then 2017, and now we're up to 2017 R3 that we just released. So it's all versioned. So in the past, what I would have had to do if I wanted to keep my output for a previous version out there, I would have to either upload a new project, or at least probably more likely a new target. So one target would be for 2017, and the next target would be for 2017 R2, or version 1, version 2, whatever. But it made me have to create a new target. Well, now I don't have to do that. I can keep it all in the same target. So let's say, for example, that this is my old build right here, and it's version 1. And now I've generated a new output, and this top one right here, I want that one to be live, and that's version 2. But I don't want to get rid of this. I still want version 1 people to be able to access this. So the solution is to set vanity URLs on each of those. So the way that you do that is you select that build, or you can right-click it, or right-click and select settings. This dialog comes up. It's just a little bit more information than the other one we just saw that was for the target. So in this one, I could say version 1. Just like that. It's already set to live, and I say save and finish. Now, even though I still have this vanity URL set at the target level, you can still see down here, big project, the build level wins. So it's going to take on version 1. And if you look down here to the URL, you can see that it changed, fictionsoft.mcoutput.com/version1/default.htm. The others, I haven't set build URLs on them, so they're still inheriting from big project. But now let's say that I want this build up here to also be live. In the past, I couldn't do this because only one build could be live, but now I can go in, select settings, and I could say, I want to make this live too. And I want this to be version 2. Save and finish. That one is now live. This one's live. If I've clicked on this one, you see it's version 2. Go back to this one, version 1. Different URLs entirely. So I could have 50 versions and they're all in the same target. Doesn't matter. So that's a really useful thing to have. Another new thing besides these vanity URLs. Now, I know a lot of people also ask, well, what about this fictionsoft? What about the .mcoutput.com? Right now, you can't change that. You still have to have that. We've had people ask us about that. Can I just have my own URL path? We're looking into that. But right now, no, it's you got to have the mcoutput.com on it. But what you can do is create a redirect file on your own if you want. If you have an older URL that you've been linking people to, for example, in my case, help.madcapsoftware.com/central. I could send people to that, and then it would redirect to this new one. So I talk about how to do that in the help. But in addition to this live URL and these vanity URLs, we've added something else in this release called a private URL. You can see it right here, and it's this long, drawn-out thing. What this is all about, and every build has this. This one's set to live. This one's set to keep. This one doesn't have any setting, but they all have this private URL, and they're all different for each and every build. And what this allows you to do is send this. You could just copy this URL and send it, email it, whatever, to anybody. Maybe you've got a group of people that you want them to keep up to date with how the documentation's going, but you don't have the final build and you don't want the general public to see it. So you send them this private URL. Anybody who's on your central license will be able to see this. You couldn't just send it to your CEO, who may not be a user on your license, and that person can see it. The person has to be a user on the license. They have to be on this user's page. But it's a real nice way to share what's going on. However, notice that as I said, this ID, it's a really long ID that's generated automatically, that number right there. If I click on another one, that number changes. So you could, as you do new builds, people who have been using Flare for any amount of time know that you're doing new builds, you're getting close to a release all the time, so that you would have to send them a new URL every time you want them to look at it. But there is a way around that. Right now I've got this Vanity URL set to big project. Let me take this off of here. I'm going to take that away so that it doesn't have that. Now if I were to send this to somebody, I'm going to go up to a new tab and just say, they could open up, that opens up the output, okay? which is great. But if I were to then set this back to big project, so now it's got this vanity URL. What I could do is, in place of this long generated ID, I could just manually type in big project, and I could send this to the person instead. And I'll tell you why that's important. So if I am constantly doing new builds, and the person is looking at an older build, maybe they're looking at this ID and I'm on this one, and they say, well, things aren't right. Well, you're not looking at the right ID. Well, if I have this target vanity URL in there, they can always use this same URL, the one that has the big project in it. They can just click, they can just use that. They could bookmark it, whatever. And what it will do will always go to the most recent build in your project that doesn't have a build URL like this. So I'm doing a brand new one right now. It's building, and that's going to have yet a new ID associated with it as soon as it's done. It should just take just another second here. But yeah, there it is. Now it has a brand new one. Well, I don't want to have to keep sending them new URLs. So they just click that same one, the one that has the big project in it, and they'll automatically get the most recent one. So that's just a tip going forward. So that's the private URL. Now there's one final thing that we did with builds related to the related to the output, and that is the ability to exclude certain outputs from search engines. As you can see, when I went into the settings here, I had the live option, the keep option, which are familiar probably to you, and then we talked about the vanity URL, but we also have this check mark, include in search engines. So automatically it's going to make this available to search engines such as Google. If people were to look up something and your help system came up as it should, they'd be able to open up your help. But there might be times when you want to deselect this. Well, why would you want to do that? Again, it goes back, I think probably the biggest use case for this is versioning. This is why I wanted it anyway. So you've got, in this example, we've got version 1 and version 2. Those are both out there. I might have up to version 10 out there, or version 20. The problem is someone going onto Google, they type something, and maybe you're on version 18 of your software, and it comes up with version 3. Well, they're getting real old output. They're getting real old information. They don't recognize that, oh, this is the version 3 software. So you still want that output, the version 3 output out there for people who have the old application and they can just link to it. That's fine. But someone just doing a general search on Google, you might want to force them to find the most recent. In this version, in this example, version 2. So what I do is I go into version 1, click on settings, and I'll just click that. Makes it real easy, save and finish. And now when someone does a search engine search, they should only find the information for version 2, not for both of them. So that can be real useful to a lot of people. All right, so that is the second. We talked about project checklists. We talked about the vanity URLs. Real quickly, I'm gonna do this third one, which is project linking. And there's not really anything to show you. It's just that it works now. What I would recommend that you do is to open up the help and just go to the what's new. And there's this, the top link is this newest version, this newest release. Project linking down here. As I mentioned, it has to do with global project linking. So global project linking, if you're not familiar, that's where you're pulling files from one Flare project into another. Maybe you got a lot of Flare projects and you want them all to use the same style sheet. So you have this main parent project where you're controlling the style sheet, and then you're importing that into your child projects. That's global project linking. Runtime merging is where you've got different Flare projects and you want them to kind of be married together when you generate the output. So one TOC is linked to the other one, and so you're generating one of those Flare project targets, and the other one is being pulled in and you're generating that output. So to the end user, it looks like one big help system, but it really came from two different Flare projects, and you're just merging these things. And then there's multilingual output. So you're getting your your Flare project translated maybe into multiple languages, and in your target you can point to these translated projects, and when you generate the output, it just kind of brings them all together. So you have one output that from different Flare projects that has multiple languages. So those are the three big ways that you can do project linking. But the problem was with Central, when we first put it out there, was you couldn't, if you were using one of these three, they wouldn't work. You could only, when you generated output for a target in Central, it was just for that one. It wasn't pulling in anything else. Well, now we've done some work to make these things work. So if you're already using one of these, what you need to do is put all of the affected projects up on Central. Central has Git behind it. That's the source control methodology that's behind it, and which it's what's called a distributed developing environment, which means that you not only have this repository that's up remotely that's doing your source control, but you also have these repositories that are local. Each Flare project has them, which it makes it really efficient. But what that also means is if you're going to use these things, you need to have central IDs. You need to have the IDs in these repositories, and the way to do that depends on different situations. If you look down here, you see these these drop downs. It depends on your situation. Is your project already bound to Central or isn't it? If it's not, follow these few steps. If it's already bound to Central, do these steps. If it's bound to Central but you haven't done the linkage, the project linking, the merging, or the translation, the multilingual output, you follow that last set of steps. And it's real simple. Essentially what it means is you gotta upload your projects to Central, all of them, and you gotta push your changes. The exact steps are different for each one of these, but it's real simple. It's just 2 or 3 steps at the most that you have to do. Once you're done with that, then you go into Central. Whatever your main project is, you build it. It should pull in those other files, and you're done. So that is that's linking projects in a nutshell. Like I said, there's really nothing to show you. It's just that. So if you want to know more information about that, you can look at the help. So that is really the demo of those 3 areas. I'm going to turn it back over to Jen real briefly, and if we have any time, we can do some questions real quick. If we don't have time to get to all of the questions, we always look at them afterwards, and we'll send you a document so everybody's question will get answered in one way or another. So Jen, it's up to you.
Great, thanks so much, Paul. That was really helpful. Just a few slides I want to run through quickly here. If you have any questions, feel free to use that questions panel, and we'll take a look at those. If not, that's okay too. But just a reminder, we do have 2 training classes coming up. As a registered attendee, you do get a discount. So contact your sales rep if you have some interest in learning more about creating and maintaining your cascading style sheets in Flare. We have a class coming up in November. Also taking your single sourcing skills to the next level in Flare. That one's coming up November 16th and 17th. So contact us, drop us a line, contact your sales rep if you have any questions about registering. You get $100 off each class for attending today. So the next thing I just want to remind everybody about, MadWorld. I mentioned this yesterday, but I'll do it again. We have an early registration discount expiring December 31st. So if you pop over to our site or that URL there, you can get a full overview of the speakers and all of the sessions. Paul's going to be presenting, so if you want to get more of Paul, please come. We'd love to see you. And then also, I think that's, we have one more, Paul, or is that it?
That's it.
That's it. Okay. Yeah, so hopefully we can join you at our conference, or you'll join us at our conference next year at the beautiful Hotel Del in Coronado. It's a stunning location, and we can't wait to see you all there. Looks like we have a question coming in, so feel free to use that panel and type them up. But here's a question. Can you copy a checklist to reuse it? Really good question.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and that was one of mine too. Not in this release, and that's I would say that was my number 1 request going into this. We had to at some point cut things off. You always have to do that with software releases. You want to do these things, and so that is out there. That is definitely being looked at. It's my number 1 request, because right now what I would have to do if I want to create a whole bunch of checklists, I would just kind of write down what are my columns, or what are these things, and then just create one at a time. And yeah, I wish I could do that right now. You can't, but stay tuned.
Great, that's a good question. Maybe just one more to clarify. The question is there a way to create file level checklists across projects? So you kind of touched on the file level checklist, but another good question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. You can't do that. That's a good request.
Yep.
Each one of these checklists is tied to a specific project. So when you say, I want to create a new checklist, you click that button, it's just going to draw in those files. There's no way for it to know right now that you want to that you've got these related projects and you want to kind of combine all of the files. There's not a way to do that right now, but that's a good good feature request.
Yeah, great. Well, I think we're coming up upon our hour here, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thanks again, Paul, for taking the time to walk us through all these great features. Hope you'll all have a chance to tinker with this and check it out. Drop us a line or drop me an email if you have any questions, have additional feature suggestions. We'd love to hear them, and we'd love to get them answered. Oh, here's another one that just came in. Maybe we can do this one quickly. How about percentage complete capability per checklist item?
Aha, per checklist item. Yeah, that's another request that I have in right now. So right now, what you're seeing at the top of that checklist is overall. It's for the entire checklist. And one of the things that I have kind of requested is, let me go back in here. So I'll go back in here. So in my checklist, I think, I've got a checklist in here. What you're seeing here is this is for the entire thing. What I kind of wanted was, as I drilled down, like I'm in this section, it's only got 3 topics in it, then this would change, or at least I'd have the option to be able to say, just show me how far is this section, or maybe you could click on a specific row and it would show you. We don't have that yet, but like I said, that was another one on my list. In fact, I always encourage people, we have in the, if you go into the help and you go under this resources, there's this submit a feature request link. And so all of these are good feature requests. So even though a lot of what you guys are bringing up, I've already been loud about it, it's good to hear that we get it from customers too, because it carries more weight. So if you can go and submit your formal feature request, we look at every single one of those. So if you can think of anything else, that's what we want. We want this to be a user community where you guys kind of drive how this thing is going to work and all the things that you eventually want to see.
Very good point. Thanks, Paul. So yes, so thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to kind of wrap it up. So we hope to see you on the next webinar. Check back to the live webinars page. We'll have more coming, and we'll look forward to having you then. So thanks again, Paul. Thanks everybody for joining, and hope you all have a great rest of the week. Take care.